And Ricardo's analogy is very apt as well. But when you talk about where we are right now, right, fifth generation warfare, wartime commander in chief, as acknowledged by President Trump himself on the campaign trail in 45-47 that Derek continues to bring to the forefront, we're absolutely still in the law of war manual in effect. And we've actually seen that come down from the White House. And last summer, we sent Judge Advocate General's letters, myself, Norman Traversy, Major General Paul Vallely, to the JAGs of the United States Space Force, Air Force, Navy, the Judge Advocate Directorate for the United States Marine Corps, and all of the branches, including the ICC, which you already mentioned, Russia and the United States are against, and the UN Human Rights Commissions, for what's going on in Canada, because have already followed to a T, where you look at the Freedom Convoy, where you look at EPIC event in Australia, which are the two massive, prior to the farmers' protests surrounding in Holland, and then you had everybody coming out, no farmers, no food. Those were the events, I think, were the tipping point for the people around the world to realize the government doesn't have your back. It really is an open, unlawful, wartime extinction level event upon mankind. And so when we follow the law of war manual, I think because JFK has just been in the news with the release of the files, I'm not sure if Juan O'Savin touched upon this on your show recently, but we look at the fact that the American Bar Association over in Surrey, England, they, after JFK was assassinated, created a memorial to President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Right beside the memorial to the death of the Magna Carta, which is surrounded by a cage from the Bar Association, the British Accreditation of Registry. So what are we talking about here as we take a 30,000-foot high level for your audience, John? The legal system that was installed by the British tyrants, which is an entire monarchy which was usurped by the Khazarian Mafia, who actually traced their bloodlines to the Canaanites and the 13 tribes that consider themselves the original spawn of Satan via the scripture, Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Going back to those times, they installed the legal system over common law and then divine natural law, which is what they did in 1867 by creating the Crown Corporation of Canada, headquartered in Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., still today, and then usurped the Republic of America in 1871 by having funded both sides of the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and said, now you owe us a war debt. And as a result of that, they established the United States of America Corporation, just like they've done the Australia Corporation in UK. These are all corporations. What I see President Trump doing as well is in following in concert with the law of war manual, which is signed by Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, the United States, at the highest levels of the military and updated in July of 2023. They are making sure that they are overseeing this, but for the public's good, to ensure that we had minimized death upon civilian populations around the world. We minimize and mitigate any destruction of property and also maim and injure civilians. Could you imagine if we said it right now today that a good majority of your police force or law enforcement, the leaders in these for the most part, right? The Masonic filth, which Rick has been talking about for years, which once again traces all the way back to Khazarian Mafia, which then goes back to the bloodlines of Cain, which is 100% what we're fighting right now, darkness versus light in the spiritual battle for souls. We look at the fact finally with the SCOC, we call it in Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada. There is no law and order anywhere that exists in any Commonwealth country around the world where they store the wealth of the commoners. They're not hearing vaccine genocide cases. If you were somebody who is against the mandates, they've doxed us. They have seized our bank accounts. They seized mine. They emptied it. They closed it, and I'm targeted up there. So this is something that we have to make sure that we mitigate our ready to rise to arms, so to speak, but knowing that the swift hammer of justice is going to drop on their throats and on their necks. So we squeeze them all for what they've got so that this doesn't happen again, because this has happened for eons and generation after generation. Just when you think you got enough of the enemy, a couple of them squirt out the back door and then they reset themselves and they play for 10 to 20 generations forward, like Wano Savin said on our show a couple of weeks ago. They are looking 20 generations down the road. And this is what we need to